The night was merciless. A cold wind sliced through the streets of downtown Chicago, rattling the broken windows of abandoned warehouses and shivering the few who dared to wander after dark. In the middle of an empty alley, a man in his mid-30s, James Caldwell, adjusted the frayed edges of his last blanket around his shoulders. He had worked 12 hours straight at the logistics warehouse on the outskirts of the city, his hands raw from lifting crates. Then he saw her, a figure crouched against the brick wall, barely moving, wrapped in nothing but thin layers of fabric soaked from the drizzle. Her teeth chattered with each breath, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. James hesitated. This wasn't his problem, or maybe it was. His reflection in a puddle looked tired, beaten down by the monotony of survival in a city where wealth and poverty existed side by side, rarely intersecting. He took a step forward. "Here, take this," he whispered, holding out the blanket. She looked at him, disbelief painted across her pale face. She was small, barely 20, wearing tattered clothes that had once been fine, now ripped and muddy. She hesitated, then slowly wrapped herself in the warm fabric. For a moment, they just sat there in silence. The distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog punctuated the darkness. James noticed a small locket around her neck, glinting faintly in the dim streetlight. He wondered about her story, about the life that had led her here, shivering on a wet street while he struggled to keep himself warm. Who are we if not the sum of our smallest choices? She whispered a trembling, "Thank you," her voice barely audible over the wind. He didn't reply, only nodded. And in that moment, a strange connection formed, fragile and unspoken. Two strangers bound by the randomness of fate, a blanket acting as the only shield against the cold, against the indifference of the world. James left shortly after, trudging back to his small apartment above the warehouse. He didn't see her again that night. He couldn't shake her image, the way her eyes reflected a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something deeper, something he couldn't name. The next morning, James returned to work. The warehouse was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, crates stacked like silent witnesses to his daily grind. As he went about his tasks, he thought about the girl, about the choices that led him to give away the only warmth he had. Do our smallest acts ripple into worlds we cannot imagine? Unbeknownst to James, she had not disappeared into the city's shadows. She had taken the blanket, yes, but she had also taken something else, a glimpse of human kindness, a reminder that life, no matter how harsh, could still surprise you. By midday, a flurry of unusual activity began at the warehouse. A sleek black car pulled up, drawing curious eyes. A young woman stepped out, dressed sharply, her hair perfectly styled despite the morning chill. There was an unmistakable air of confidence about her, a presence that demanded attention. She walked directly to James, her expression calm, almost regal. "James Caldwell," she asked. Her voice was firm, certain. He nodded, confusion knitting his brow. "I'm the girl from last night," she said simply. James froze. This was impossible. The girl he had seen, weak and trembling, soaked to the bone, this woman looked like she belonged in a magazine cover or a corporate boardroom. Her clothes were designer, immaculate. There was no sign of the shivering stranger who had accepted his blanket. How much can a single night change everything we think we know? She smiled faintly, almost apologetically. "I wanted to return this," she said, pulling the blanket from under her arm. But there was something else in her hand, a business card, glossy and embossed, the name of a global investment firm printed in bold letters. James stared, heart racing. His mind tried to connect the impossible dots, but they didn't add up. The girl he had helped, the one so fragile she could have been swept away by the wind, was now standing before him as someone entirely other. Someone powerful, someone wealthy. And in her eyes, he saw not just gratitude, but intention. What if acts of kindness are never truly forgotten? What if they return to us in ways we could never predict? James took the card, hands trembling slightly. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm, unaware that a single encounter on a rain-soaked street was about to change the course of 2 lives forever. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm, unaware that a single encounter on a rain-soaked street was about to change the course of 2 lives forever. James held the card tightly, staring at the elegant print, the logo of a firm that seemed impossibly out of reach for someone like him. The girl, no, the woman, stood patiently, her eyes scanning him with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "I don't understand," James finally managed to say. How is this possible?" She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hinted at secrets carefully guarded. "Some things cannot be explained by logic alone," she said. "Last night, you gave me more than a blanket. You gave me hope." The night was heavy with snow. Each flake drifted under the dim street lamps along the narrow road. The silence was broken only by the sound of tires crunching against the frozen ground. Inside the car sat a man, alone with his thoughts. His eyes carried the weight of endless workdays and a loneliness he had learned to hide. He was a CEO, a man of success in the eyes of the world, but deep inside, he was searching for something he couldn't name. As he drove further away from the city, he wondered if life was only about meetings, deadlines, and empty victories. He didn't know that tonight, his life was about to change forever. At the bus stop ahead, a little girl sat quietly on the bench, her head bowed, her hands pressed against her chest. The snow fell on her thin shoulders as if the world had forgotten her. And then, in a weak, trembling voice, she whispered, "Please, my chest hurts so much." The man froze. His heart skipped a beat. In that single moment, all the walls he had built around himself began to break. What if our next choice could change everything again, unexpectedly, irreversibly, forever? James couldn't stop thinking about her, about the transformation that had occurred overnight. He replayed every detail in his mind: the shivering girl, the blanket, the confidence and wealth she now exuded. He returned to the warehouse that day, but the monotony of crates and forklifts felt hollow, almost surreal. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow suspicious. By mid-afternoon, a discreet envelope slid under his office door. His name, handwritten in a flowing script, made his heart skip. Inside, a letter: "Meet me at the North Pier warehouse tonight. Come alone. There are things you need to see, things you cannot imagine." He hesitated. Should he go? The street outside was already alive with the quiet tension of approaching nightfall. The thought of encountering her again filled him with a mixture of excitement and fear. How far would you go to uncover the truth, when the truth itself might change everything you know? Night fell fast. James parked his truck near the warehouse, shadows stretching across the deserted lot. The building, abandoned for years, looked almost like a relic of another era. Rusted doors, shattered windows, silent and empty. Inside, faint light flickered. She was there, standing near a stack of crates, her silhouette sharp against the glow of a single overhead lamp. "James," she said softly, "I wanted to show you something." He followed her as she moved toward a corner of the warehouse. A set of documents was spread across a table: contracts, ownership papers, photographs, even news clippings. They told a story of a multinational enterprise she had built in less than 12 months, all while traveling through Europe, Asia, and North America. The scale was staggering. James ran his fingers over the papers, his mind racing. How could someone so young, so fragile the night before, achieve such an empire so quickly? He looked up at her, searching for answers in her composed face. "It's not just about money," she said. "It's about power, influence, making a difference. Every decision we make sends ripples farther than we can see. You reminded me of that." He noticed a small photograph pinned to the board, a young girl standing in a refugee camp, a smiling boy holding a medicine vial, people in uniforms distributing supplies. His chest tightened. These were not just business ventures. They were humanitarian missions, investments with moral purpose. Could one small act ignite a chain that reshapes lives across continents? "You might wonder," she continued, "why I came back, why I revealed this to you. But I need someone who remembers the streets, someone who understands the fragility of life, someone like you." James's head spun. She was offering him a role, not just in her empire, but in a global mission that bridged the worlds of wealth. The night air was thick with rain and rusted metal. James stood in the warehouse, surrounded by silence that felt almost alive. She handed him a tablet. On its screen, a video played, hidden footage from last night's alley. Cameras from nearby shops had captured James handing her the blanket. It looked simple, almost ordinary, yet it was the cornerstone of a network she had quietly built. A web that tracked not power or wealth, but kindness. She sought people whose smallest acts of empathy could shift outcomes far beyond what they imagined. What if our morality, our compassion, was the most powerful currency of all? James looked around, and suddenly the shadows in the warehouse weren't empty. They were alive with choices, each carrying the weight to alter thousands. maybe millions of lives. "You see," she said softly, her voice steady, "the world has space for extraordinary acts, but they often come wrapped in risk. And sometimes, those acts return to you in ways you cannot predict." James swallowed hard. His life, once defined by crates and cold warehouses, was now tangled with someone who appeared like a ghost, a phantom carrying both miracle and chaos, born from a single gesture. Are we ready for the consequences when our compassion becomes a catalyst for change? And just as suddenly as she had arrived, she was gone, slipping into the night, leaving James with screens, documents, and possibilities too vast to measure. The city beyond the warehouse carried on, unaware. But its rhythm, its very trajectory, had already shifted. James realized something profound. The blanket, the night, the choice, it had all been a beginning. A doorway into a world where kindness was currency, and every decision carried consequences he could never have foreseen. A doorway into a world where kindness was currency, and every decision carried consequences he could never have anticipated. Days passed, and James couldn't stop thinking about the young woman who had returned the blanket. Her words echoed in his mind. Her confidence, her wealth, her mysterious mission, everything about her defied explanation. The warehouse felt smaller, the streets colder, the world heavier with unspoken possibilities. Then came the call. James Caldwell. Her voice, calm but insistent, spoke from the other end of the line. "It's time." He didn't ask what time, what for, or why. He simply followed her instructions, driving to a secluded mansion on the outskirts of the city. Security cameras, private guards, and discreet vehicles suggested a life he could barely imagine. Yet as he entered the grand hall, it wasn't the opulence that struck him. It was the purpose. The woman stood at the center, surrounded by maps, charts, and screens tracking global initiatives, medical aid shipments, education programs, disaster relief projects. "This is what your kindness started," she said softly, a ripple that became a wave. James moved closer, overwhelmed. He saw statistics, reports, and images of people whose lives had already been touched thousands of miles away, yet connected by a single night of human decency. Could one small act truly change the course of so many lives? She walked over to a digital map, her fingers tracing points across continents. Your decision to share a blanket. It wasn't just a moment. It became a signal. It showed me that there are people worth investing in. People who understand empathy, who can help move the world in subtle but profound ways. James shook his head. "I was just trying to help. I didn't know any of this would happen." "Exactly," she said. "That's why it matters. The world needs people who act without expectation, who give without anticipation." She handed him another envelope. This one contained tickets, documents, and instructions. James realized he was being asked to leave everything familiar, the warehouse, the city, even his own routines. He was being invited into her world, into a life where his choices could influence not just his own fate, but that of countless others. Are we ever truly ready for the opportunities that kindness can create? James's chest tightened. The stakes were unimaginable. He could decline, return to the monotony of his previous life, and forget the entire experience. Or he could step through the door, embrace the unknown, and allow his compassion to guide him into uncharted territory. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees like a reminder of that rainy night. He remembered the shivering stranger, the vulnerability, the fragile humanity that had first connected them. That moment, so ordinary yet profound, had set in motion a series of events beyond comprehension. He looked at her one last time. She smiled faintly, knowing, almost hauntingly, as if aware that their journey together had only begun. "Whatever you choose," she said, "remember that the world doesn't reward expectation. It responds to courage, to empathy, to choices made when no one is watching." James took a deep breath. The city, the warehouse, even the blankets, everything seemed distant, almost irrelevant. A new chapter was beginning, but the path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, triumphs, and risks. And yet, he knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same. How many lives go untouched because we fail to act? And what if the smallest gesture could one day redefine everything? The mansion lights dimmed as night deepened, shadows stretching across corridors filled with untold possibilities. James stepped forward, uncertain yet compelled, ready to embrace a destiny sparked by something as simple, as human, as sharing a blanket. And somewhere, far beyond the city lights, decisions were being made, ripples spreading silently across continents, hinting at power, change, and consequences that no one could fully anticipate. The world remained unaware, yet fragile, alive, and waiting for the next act, the next choice, the next ripple of humanity. And James realized the story was far from over.